Hey, welcome to a Sniper Side video. We want to talk about scope truing. Calibrating your scope, truing it, whatever you want to call it, is an important step, especially today with ballistic software. If you look at any of your ballistic software, the first step in truing that software is calibrating your scope and doing what we call a tall target test. Now, downrange, we have a Sniper Side tall target that you can get at Box to Bench Precision. We'll take you down there and show you that. It allows the user to track and test their scope, whether it be mil or MOA, to within 36 inches or 10 mils. We also have a Target USA scope testing tool that we put together. This is an older model. They've since upgraded it. But this is a 30-pound tool to hold our scope in place, so that way when we're adjusting it, we don't get any movement in the system. Now, you can bag it in, you can shoot it, you can do all kinds of stuff, but that puts a little bit of human error into it. And when we want to test it to that quarter MOA, 1/10 of mil, we want it as stable and as locked down as possible. One of the guys who first built one of these on Sniper's Hide called it the Humbler. Big, heavy piece of I-beam with a pick rail attached to it. That held the scope in place. So when you start manipulating the turrets and turning it, that the system is not moving. That's what's most important. That is, you don't get any movement in the system to accurately test and track your scope. Now we'll go down range and we'll look at it and we'll talk about what those numbers mean and what we're doing. So here we are at 100 yards with the Sniper Side tall target. As you can see, it's very contrasty. We have the checkerboard pattern, shows up well down range. This target is 36 inches tall or 10 mils. We also have a 4-foot level here to show how we align this and made sure that the vertical lines are straight. You want to eliminate any angles and make sure there's no issue with putting this paper up, that it's straight and square and that the scope is going to track true along with it. We want to track to the fall of gravity, right? So if you put your reticle at the top, start dialing your elevation up, the reticle is going to move down your 10 mils, and you want to make sure that it's tracking true. The other element you want to use with this is with this vertical line. You want to make sure that scope is tracking along that vertical line. We have a round director in there with a round tube, and if you put a certain amount of windage in, you can see an error with the scope tracking off center of that line. Usually at the top of your elevation run, it'll start to curve off a little bit, but the more elevation and the more adjustment you put in at zeroing, the more chance that this will not track along the vertical line. But you have your checkerboards, you have your sub MOA. Your only limitation with this target is your imagination. You can shoot it, you can save it, you can just keep it on a board, use 1/2 for shooting, 1/2 for not shooting it. And putting it alongside the level, it's just to show you that there are other options to calibrate your scope out there. You don't have to go out and buy something like this, but you do need a measured distance. You want to make sure that you're 100 yards away exactly from the scope turrets. We measured this off with a 300-foot tape measure, so we know this board to the scope is at 100 yards exactly. Then with our reticle up on the top, we're running it down, and we'll do this several times to make sure that it's working. So let's go back to the 100-yard bench and we'll take a look at what we're doing over there. Okay, so here we are at 100 yards. We have the Sight Mark Pinnacle 3 to 18 set up on our Targets USA scope tracking. We have it torqued into the pick rail, make sure everything's good. We don't want any movement in the system when we're dialing it. We're lining up the reticle and we're making sure it's straight and square. As I can see looking down here, the reticle tracks along with both the level and the tall target. So our reticle is mounted straight in the rings. Everything's good there. The next thing we're going to do is we're making sure we're up at the top and we're lined up and we're just slightly off of perfect, so we could bring it up just a little bit. Needs about 0.2 up, which is really tiny. Okay, so once it's set and locked into place, I can then dial it. The other thing you want to do is check your parallax and make sure parallax is good. As you're here and you're lined up, you would move your head ever so slightly to make sure there's no parallax in the system. parallax on this scope is almost dead nuts at 100 yards, which is really good. So we know I have no parallax in the system. Now I can dial my elevation up to 10 mils, bring it to 10, go ahead and take a look at where it sits, and it's right about there. Bring it back to 0, see how it returns, line it up, everything's good. You can watch it to make sure there's no weird movements in it and that it's trending along with the fall of gravity. Bring it down. There you go. Back up and see where 0 hits. I'll do this several times to figure out what the tracking is. Then I'll take that number and I'll either input it into software like Cold Bore Field Firing Solutions, which has a utility to test this, or I could do the longhand math. I'm putting in 10 mils of elevation. How much movement is it going down range? I can then figure out whether it's tracking at 100% or not. It appears that this scope is tracking about 99 to 98%. It's about a tenth or so off of perfect. That will go into our software then. Your software has the ability to change that value. And it's not uncommon for scopes to be off between 1 and 2% from perfect when we're traveling that far. It's actually quite common. We see it a lot in classes. So what I'll do is I'll put that number into the software. The software will give me a new number. So instead of it being 0.1 mil, it'll be 0.099 because it's trending just slightly low. And that's going to let the software know that it needs to correct for this small error in the scope. 0.1 or 1/10 off is nothing. That could be taken up by the thickness of the reticle, size of targets, things like that. We'll check it over and over again. We'll do this test at least 3 times with an optic like this in various points of our review. That's why our reviews take a little bit longer than some of the others. We just don't come out one day and knock it out. So here we have our scope calibration test, tall target downrange, and making sure everything works with the Pinnacle 3 to 18. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, head over to the Sniper's Hide forum. Give us a note. Let us know what you think. Appreciate it. Good impact.
Yep. See the red flasher?
Yep.
Impact.